Hi guys. Joe,
Hello, Jonas.
Hi, Luis.
How are you?
Very good. How about yourself?
Doing well.
Great. Where are you based? Forgot.
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay.
New Jersey, sunny New Jersey today.
Good.
How about you? How about you?
Colorado. Fort Collins.
Love that state.
Yeah.
Love Colorado.
It's great, except when you have those fires. It's a little smoky now.
Yes. Yes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Hey, Jonas. Hello, Louis.
Wait a minute. Or a couple. I see another agenda topic, structure of ODIM project and repository. It's an important topic. I guess I don't know who put it there though, but I'll ask.
Yes, Jonas. Yeah, I think last week this was.
Was that a discussion topic last week? Yeah.
Yes, Jonas. Yeah. So Alex brought this question, so we thought we can put it in the next discussion topic.
Okay.
Basically, the question was, with other contributions coming in, right? Like the rack manager extension, the plugin, and the update service and things like that, which might be independent, right, than the resource aggregator.
Yeah, we shall see. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we want to. I think his question was how to structure the overall thing, right? Will it be under this root tree itself, or will there be a root tree under which there are multiple projects like resource aggregator, composition, and this and that?
Yeah.
Emulator, for example, right? DMC emulator, all those things.
Yeah. So we have an antitrust policy thing here going on. Luis, have you been asked to share this with us?
Yeah, it's standard. Nothing to be alarmed about. It just wanted to put this up. We try to put it up every once in a while, just to remind folks of the antitrust policy at the Linux Foundation. Nothing. Again, nothing. I'm trying. There's no agenda behind this. It's just policy to put it up there, just as a reminder. No one's done anything that breaks the policy.
Okay.
We've done nothing wrong.
Good.
Nothing wrong. Everyone innocent.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'll take it down in a couple of seconds. As soon as the meeting starts, I'll go ahead and take it down. Just a reminder to. And there is a full document here if folks want to.
Is this a new process?
Well, not really new. It's just sort of us program managers just reminded to put it up on the screen every once in a while, just to remind folks of the policy that's there. Again, everybody's innocent. There's nothing. There's no issues whatsoever.
So in Lord, I'm trying to read through it, and I get very sleepy every time. I can't get through the first sentence. So.
It's just a bunch of lawyer talk. That's all.
That's exactly what it is, but it is real. But just the FYI, really.
As long as
if you really want to go to sleep, then go ahead and grab this link right there. Then you'll sleep soundly.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the full-blown legal thing.
Okay. So for today, we have two topics. I looked at the agenda. I think, Rafal, you added the structure of ODIM projects and repositories, and then we have the composition service proposal as well. So I think that's a good order, actually, to take it in. So I don't know, Rafal, do you want to lead the repository thingy then, or? you don't have
Rafael?
it doesn't have a microphone next to his picture there. So does it mean that there is no audio?
There's no audio.
So there was apparently some discussion last week around this topic, the repository, and I think generally, I think if we add something like right now, the repository that is there is for sort of the aggregation seed code, and that includes like a plugin for generic redfish. Does that make sense? Perhaps that plugin should be put in its own repository. I don't know, but in any case, it is what it is. So if we add something like to that, I would say stack, like for instance, there is a composition service being added. Depending on how that service is being done, it would make sense for that to go into the same repository, I think. Bear in mind, it would be a new branch, of course, and that branch would be lifted into development branch once we feel that it has reached a certain maturity. Alex, did you have something that you felt?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we need to look at things in terms of sort of functional structure that we have, right? So we have, in my mind, right, anything that we would define as a management service within ODIM, right? Anything that exposes ODIM APIs or some particular.
Yeah, how do you define a management service? We're talking about redfish services here, but what is a management service to you then?
Well, so to me, management service is a piece of software that implements one or more redfish defines APIs. Okay, or endpoints of the APIs. So the redfish specification defines a whole range of things, but I think the implementation could be modular, where we have eventing, where we have user management, where we have composition, where we have aggregation, where we have a whole bunch of things that are really meant to be worked on in parallel or enhanced in parallel, right?
No. So what did you say? Somebody meant something? Sorry? How did you come to that
I
conclusion?
said that a management service is something that implements one or more redfish defined APIs. And the segregation of those APIs is typically by the domain of concern. So user management is one, eventing is another, composition is another, aggregation is another. And so to me, those are separate. Well, these could be all in one repo, but in separate branches within the repo.
No. That doesn't make any sense if you ask me. You can have separate repos, obviously, but to have separate branches branches
Fine.
are used in order to manage the repository, right?
Yeah, so all I'm suggesting, I guess, is that we define a structure in such a way that we can work on things in parallel, right? So an update service would have its own space where you could create new branches and do development work and then uplift everything into the golden repo.
But hold on. So if you think what that means for a user then that is doing a Git clone and want to build the project, that means that so right now we have an API service, which is the key. That's the thing you hit, and you don't, depending on what API you might actually go to another service, and you have like the account service, you have session service, you have all these different services. So you will spread them out over different repositories.
Not necessarily. All I'm suggesting is that we need an approach where they can be worked on in parallel and multiple versions in parallel. That's all. I want to keep them in the same repo, fine. I just want to make sure that we clearly demarcate the boundaries of those services so that.
Słyszę, mam tu spotkanie.
So actually, Alex, if you wanted to separate them out into different repositories, I would be interested in understanding how and how you would build it, as well as
I think
how you will
he's
run CI/CD, and what will be the experience of the end user. If we determine,
interested in different development domains, not necessarily different.
yeah, so
Exactly.
this is a very abstract discussion. Please make it very real by
Right.
talking about how it will work in Git, because that's, by the end of the day, our tool sets, right?
Well, normally within the Redfish forum, we just create a branch. And then when that
Redfish
branch,
Forum, you work on specs and not actual code.
no, we actually, well, we work on models, right? And so you do development, and then when you decide everyone agrees that it is sufficient maturity, then you add it into the main branch.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's going on with, for instance, the plugin for unmanaged racks now. There is a separate branch where that development is taking place. Once it's mature enough, it will go into the development
Exactly
branch.
why I think we're in violent agreement.
Yeah. So, but there might be different. So good input, John. There might be different things. So let's say somebody would come in with an orchestrator or a composer that is a user interface. That thing might actually live in its own repository, right?
Well,
no,
it could, right? I mean, well, I don't know how you want to do it, but what we need to allow for, I guess, is, you know, now that I've collected my thoughts a little bit more, is multiple implementations of these interfaces. And so if we want to have an API broker or a gateway on the front, the API service that then routes to the right implementation, you know, based on the API invocation, that would be fine, right? You know, you could create new branches, you can download everything, you can make changes to the piece that you care about, then, you know, build it, run it, do whatever you want to do. Just want to make sure that we do things in such a way that it's very simple to understand, you know, and based on the directory structure, what lives where. That's all.
So guys, this was the agenda that I put last time, you know, talk about that structure. So let me give some thoughts from my perspective. So first of all, let's talk about specific examples that we need to locate in the source tree. Branching strategy is the different story, right? If it comes to the layout of the directories, the current ODIM repository is split between different, you know, SVC services that are specific to the resource aggregator, and be very hard to put on the same level some other functional blocks like composer. This is first item. Next item is that components like the simulator that are external to the ODIM component itself. This should be probably a separate repo.
Agree. So I think we are in agreement here. Like a simulator would be a separate repository because nobody's dependent on that. But if you sort of would put the aggregation service in a different repository, then the API service should be able to be functioning without it, which is not the case, right?
But the coupling should be loose, right? Because you may have multiple implementations of something potentially, or alternative implementations that may have different advantages, disadvantages. Somehow we have to be able to choose who will actually realize a particular API, so that when the API service makes a call to another service, that there's some choice made, you know, as to, you know, where to go next. And in some cases, it may be going to one place, in other cases to another. So just, you know, I'm not saying we need to have multiple repos or we need to have, you know, whatever we need. All I'm saying is that we just need to kind of think through this in terms of separation between the API and its implementation, right? So,
but if you had, for instance, different aggregation service implementations, I think they would live in the same repository, and then you could pick which one you would fire up and use in configuration files.
Yes, we're in violent agreement that the single repo is fine. The directory structure is what we're talking about, I believe, if I understood Raffle right. And so to me, the directory structure is completely orthogonal to the repo. You know, you can keep it all in one repo, right? That's fine. But we want to be able to segregate code inside directories in such a way that it's fairly easy to work on small chunks, right? And not have to have collisions with somebody else who's working on something in another directory.
Yeah, agree. Is there, Rafael, you have been poking at this a little bit now. Is there something you want to see changed in the directory structure that you feel is could make it easier?
Yeah, so first of all, as we all agree, the BMC simulator would be separate repo, right? In the ODIM project space. In terms of the let's say unmanaged track plugin, it can easily augment the current structure. I think that I don't have any specific proposals, but when we want to fit the composer block from AMI, this is the moment we should probably think how to add it to the existing tree.
Why can't we just do that now and not wait until it's actually available? We can decide what the folder
Well,
structure
so
is.
that proposal is on the agenda today as well. The only concern I have there, and we should discuss it later, is that, I mean, it can live in the same repo, but it will certainly be, it's in Python, and it will be a different thing living in that repo. So we should get in, but I guess if you have a new service that is a Redfish service, and you want it in the same stack, I think it should go in the same repo.
Well, yeah.
And be called like SVC composer, for example.
Yeah, SVC composition or something. I think there is a difference between a composer and a composition service in my mind, but I could be wrong. I mean, it's
no, I agree with you, Jonas. It is different. There's the client side, and then there's the actual implementation of the interfaces. And so the implementation of the interfaces would be service, slash composer or composition or whatever. The other piece could be put in a separate repo. It could be put in the same one, but under a different directory structure.
Yeah, that's my thinking as well. So
yeah,
what, Rafael, do you agree there? Or
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I think we have a good suggestion, and then just on the branching strategy, there is a lot of different strategies out there in the industry, obviously, and we are happy to change. But I think as one of the principles, I think if you create a new functionality, like a new plugin or a new service or something, to carry that development out in a separate branch, I think makes a lot of sense. Obviously, there are a couple of things there. One is that when it's mature enough, we can pull it into the development branch, and then it will be part of a release, right? Eventually. There is a couple of things, though, that this approach does not cover, and that is because normally reviews will happen when you raise the pull request, and if you raise a pull request for the development branch and want to get it in there, then you abandon the strategy to wait till it's mature enough, right? So how do you get these review requests going in your branch while you are developing this without sending it into the development branch? Is I guess a question that we need to
Jonas,
address.
I wonder if it's if we can take an approach similar to what they used to do. I'm not sure what they do now in OpenStack, but at some point they had a certification suite of sorts that basically were a set of tests that validated that you've complied with all of the API definitions.
Alex, I don't think it's a problem of compliance. It's a problem of if you are working on a feature branch like Intel is working currently for unmanaged rack plugin, you probably will be you will ask stakeholders or other members to the review process once you're ready with the full feature, and this could be immersive code review.
Well, so yeah, but I think you can do that. You can do that as the PTL of your project, right? If you have a project leader that kind of drives the project, they can conduct reviews at that level, and then once there is a request to integrate into the into the golden branch, then yes, there's a formal review there as well. But at least, as a leader of that project, I would imagine we haven't defined the PTL role yet.
We have
But
maintainers, but that's it. Yeah.
yeah, maintainers would maintain to me is like the stable branch, right? They're the guys who gatekeep the stability of that. What I'm saying is that if we have projects, especially if they involve multiple companies, picking one person to kind of drive that project and make sure that things go smoothly, that was the way we used to do it, for example, in ONAP.
Yeah.
And then the idea was very simple. That person would arrange whatever development process they felt was appropriate for that particular feature. If they had to conduct reviews, those reviews would happen within the domain of that project first, and then it would be a formal review by the maintainers.
But it's not a question of who's doing the review. It's a question of how we deal with the Git. And Rafael, let me just throw some thoughts out there. Let's say you create a branch that you call plugin unmanaged racks or something, and that's where the main development happens for that plugin. Then perhaps you can have feature branches outside that, and then you raise pull requests to merge them into plugin unmanaged racks and set up the reviewing process for that. Because I think in Git, it's basically the pull request that will trigger a review request, right?
Yeah, I think that, but the pull request would be generated if you try to, let's say, merge into the main branch. Or yeah,
No, I think you can set it up for any branch, right?
Yeah.
No, a pull request is a request to merge into the main branch, which basically allows you time to go review it before you make a decision to merge or not.
No. So when we have feature branches and we want to merge them into a development branch, we have development, we raise a pull request for that. Merging one branch into another branch, you can raise a pull request, and that can trigger a review request, right? So it's not, there is no main branch. There is master, which is probably going away in this new world we're living in. So it's going to be called something else, perhaps main. But in any case, I think that the pull request will be raised from when you want to merge any branch into another branch, and you can have that trigger a review request then, right?
I mean, I know it from other projects that you write something like WIP, like WIP in front of work in progress, so that people know there's already a PR coming for a specific feature and potentially can start have a look at it and can start review it, but they know it's still work in progress and not ready to merge.
Okay, but I think I agree with, that's a good input as well. I think I agree with Alex that whoever is working and in charge of that new feature branch could set up their own reviewing processes. But I think it's important that we have the review process somewhere. But yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We are a bit into the meeting, and I want to allow for AMI to talk a little bit about the proposal for the composition service. Is there anything left on this branching, or and also Rafael, if you want to change around the directory structure, feel free to propose that, and we can, if you think of something that is better than what we have now, for sure.
Okay, I will think about that. And Jonas, you're right. You can set up any PR process for any branch on the GitHub as you want. It's the configuration matter only.
Great. So then, Jos, who's driving this? Do you want to talk about it, or how do we want to go about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Jonas. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I have Muthu and Divya from AMI. Muthu will be explaining what we are going to contribute. But as we discussed, a couple of weeks ago, our AMI's goal is to contribute the composition service. This is basically the REST APIs that are focused on composing dynamic nodes, decomposing nodes, attaching, detaching, and things like that. This effort is to bring this proposal here so that we can discuss and get it approved. We have already started the porting process, just to give you a background, in the beginning of this ODIM initiative, we did have a version of implementation, but the technology or the language of choice was not a popular one. We went with Lua, and right now, the decision was to opt for a Python base so that the adoption will be much easier for whoever wants to use it. So that's happening here. So we have already started the porting process, and the team is well in progress. Today's plan is to bring up to you all on what we are planning to contribute in a month or two, so that we all know what's coming next and what we will plan to do after that as well. Muthu, you can take the floor. You can share the page, show the text that you had. If needed, you can use the PPT as well, right? The 1 or 2 slide decks that you had, you can use that as well. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Hello, everyone. This is Muthu Kumaran from AMI. You can call me Muthu. I will quickly share my screen. And this is the proposal we are adding into the composition for the composition service. Basically, the composition service provides the infrastructure to compose a logical system called compose node. And the compose nodes will be created based on their JSON payload. The JSON payload includes the hardware resource information, whatever the requirements, like how many, what's the processor to be chosen, what kind of processor, how much memory I need, and what type of network information. So it accepts all the hardware related information, resources information as a payload, as a JSON payload. Then internally we keep all the resource inventory information in our local database that is retrieved from the ODIM aggregation resource aggregator. So based on the hardware resources availability in our local repository, we will identify that the API, the composition service will identify the best suitable computer system and other resources for the node. Node is nothing but a logical entity, and that takes care of associating a computer system and other hardware resources into the node. The composition service, the node composition is of two steps. One is allocate. The first step is to provide the resource payload, what kind of resource node to be composed. Then the composition service will identify a system and allocate the resources. Then the administrator can review the resource information, whether that is really matches with their requirement before really do the assemble. The assemble action is what really do the linking of the hardware resources and associated the hardware resources into the systems. Apart from this allocate and assemble actions, after the compose node is assembled and ready for the usage, and there are options to dynamically attach and detach the hardware resources like NVMe drives, or create other zones or endpoints from the resource aggregator. We can attach any other resources to it, and if it is not needed, we can also detach it. We are also planning to provide the APIs for the lifecycle of the node, delete node, and certain actions on the node, power reset on the node and the boot source override, those kind of APIs. This is about the brief on the composition service, what we are going to deliver as an open source. And the API list we have listed here. There is a node collection, Redfish V1 nodes, and under that there are node instances, the new logical compose node, and the HTTP method supported. On top of it, there are actions in different APIs, allocate action, assemble action, attach, detach resources, power reset, and boot source override. In addition to that, the resource inventory, we are creating a OEM action, resource inventory, to time get to the latest resource inventory.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
The attach detach has to do with network attachments, right?
Yes.
and the assembly happens based on the allocated piece parts that were done by the allocate action, right?
Yes.
In that allocate action, we support, I believe we had two modes of doing things, constraint based and more explicit. We're supporting both, or?
Yeah, we are supporting kind of both. The allocate action, you can directly choose a computer system so that that will be directly associated. There's more specific, or you can provide a generic payload like hardware resource information. Yeah, I want a processor, this type of processor, 64
Right.
GB memory or something like that. Constraint based allocation is
Alex,
also possible.
Alex, as you called the constraint versus specific, John can give us elaborate on this one. But this, to be fully compliant with Redfish constraint composition, you need to change the API structure, right? Because you are.
That's my point. We need to make sure that we comply with the spec. That's one thing. And second, there may be additional things we want to do from a composition standpoint. And this is something that we can discuss. And John, not suggesting we go and do this tomorrow, but we should talk about ad hoc assembly of piece parts in the same way that it would be done on Amazon.
Well, actually, Alex, can I just interrupt you there a sec? So in terms of composition, the thing that I'd ideally like to see, and I think this is a great effort, right? So don't take me the wrong way here, right? But the question I had was more, sorry, I've got a bit of a cough going. The thing I was going to ask AMI was, is AMI involved in, you're aware that the composition service, the Redfish composition service is under development for extending, right? Based on what's there today. There's a whole bunch of efforts that are going on to add functionality to it. And so ourselves as HPE, we're pretty interested in that and would like to see, once it's all ratified by the DMTF, we would like to see that as part of whatever composition we're going to have in code as part of the ODIM project. So, so just getting back to my question, are you guys aware of the work that's going in the composition task force, and are you involved in that?
Martin, I can answer for that question. We are part of the task force, but we are not active contributors yet. The way we have been approaching this is, in spite of, thanks to lots of different activities, we normally wait till it gets ratified. As soon as something gets ratified, then we pick it up and implement, right, as part of the actual code stack and things like that. And we also had the same plan here, right, for ODIM as well. So we wanted to start with what we had right now, what we have showcased or demoed, in terms of POCs or industry events. We wanted to start with that first. And then as soon as this is out or released, our immediate goal is to start with the latest Redfish spec, right? So this is what our plan is. So as soon as this is released, we will align ourselves with the latest Redfish composability spec compliance. Right. That's our goal.
No, that's what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fantastic, and I like the approach as well. Is start with what's there, because obviously this latest stuff isn't ratified as yet, and then you would say you would add that once it is ratified by the DMTF. So great, no issue at all.
So
yes, and go ahead. If I can add, if I can, one more.
Yeah.
We also had feedback. We also had a feedback, or input, I would say, last week from Thomas, that it would be good if we can also start, implementing the work in progress draft also, right? That way we will be ready to release something when the spec is about to be released, kind of. So that will be also planned, so we will start with this and we will align ourselves with the latest spec. And then moving forward, our plan or our goal will be to play an active role as part of the Redfish composability task force as well, so that we will know where it is heading towards, which should help us have a faster implementation. Maybe we can also start in parallel implementing and get things out much quicker. So that's the goal. Yeah.
Right.
So
perfect.
I had a question about the inventory, right? So you mentioned that we would keep everything in the same database that the aggregation service could potentially use to to discover new systems and assemble them into groups and whatnot. Is that true?
Alex, I can respond for that as well. One of the design mandate, right? One of the design mandate is to make sure that this composition service will be able to run independently from a different system, right? So from that aspect, if we rely on the same database, right, it might not be sufficient. So we will have APIs that can read the inventory. Now, Muthu, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we will have APIs to read the inventory so that we can do this constrained composition kind of features, right?
Yeah,
For
so
unconstrained, where you go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so for unconstrained, for example, where the user will be able to give the exact specifics on what they want to compose, we don't need the data because they are going to give us the input. The assumption is they have already used the resource aggregator, no? The orchestration layer on the top, right, whoever it is. The assumption is they are using the resource aggregator.
Yeah. On top or on the side, right? I guess I'm kind of trying to understand the flow. So from the orchestration, upstream orchestration perspective, I could be doing placement of VNFs, right? And this is actually a real use case that we envisioned in ONAP.
Correct.
VNF is being placed. There is no resource that matches the VNF requirements and the VNF descriptor. So what we would want to do is compose that on the fly. And once it's composed, it needs to be now visible to the rest of the ODIM components so that they can take whatever actions they need to take on the model, right? So somehow the model needs to be shared, in my mind, between all these different services that could be invoked in parallel, right? So that kind of was the gist of what I was asking. You know, are you going to provide a way of syncing to the ODIM inventory, right? The state of things that it keeps. Because I could then say create 10 hosts to place my VNF, and then I would want them to be immediately visible to the aggregator, so I can potentially group them together for further operations, like changing the boot ordering or changing, you know, PROM configurations or other things. And I want to be able to do that across a collection of things.
But
isn't that already catered for in the discussions, at least when discussing the specs, so that they will be in the Redfish eventually?
Yeah, the thing is here, what we need to remember is that what drives the capabilities in the composition service, apart from the implementation, is the actual spec. And I think the discussions going on there on Thursdays are really, really interesting. And anybody that have input should either join or forward those type of input to whoever representative from their company is already there. I think it's important that we get that into the spec now if there are use cases. Otherwise, we might need to ratify it later, right?
I think that's also where the in parallel implementation would make a whole lot of sense. That if we have very strict notion about that a composition service should be capable of standing by itself, should not have to share a database with somebody else, then we need to have objects in that model tree that caters for these type of requests.
Or we need to federate different data models together into something that is ODIM wide.
But what other data model though, Alex?
Well, so I'm just trying to understand how this would work, right? Because, you know, somebody has to keep track of all the disaggregated parts, right? And what they are. Is that going to be done inside the composition and hidden away from the rest of ODIM services? I'm trying to understand what's going to be private and what's going to be public in terms of data, because I can imagine a service that wants to do something to, well, let me be concrete. How would group operations work in this case if I don't really know what composed nodes have been created? In my mind, I guess, Martin, maybe I'm going to clarify it this way. I should be able to create a group of hosts under management that includes both atomic and composed nodes, right? And then I want to be able to execute a command against that collection of hosts and have it be consistently performed across. Whether it's composed or not really doesn't matter. From the operational perspective, I want to do a power on reset, for example. Well, I want to do it across everything.
So the redfish model, when you compose something, it appears under system collection. So there's no distinction because it's just a member of the system collection.
Exactly.
How it originated. There may be a property tag which tells you how, if you want to find out. But basically, it's just a system.
Right, and that's my question, John. So that system, that model is implemented in the aggregator today.
No, it is not. Well, sorry, that's an implementation question. So it's not part of the aggregation model of redfish. But all it does is it appears as another system in the system collection. So
but
what
the aggregation service, John, allows for you to create a group of aggregates, right? And
no, that's why aggregation services are on top of systems, right? You create a bunch of systems, and then you can now aggregate those systems and other types of systems like storage systems into a higher aggregate.
So I guess what I'm really asking, if I remember right, during the architectural kind of tutorial, there was a component that actually kept the actual representation of the redfish information model, in a particular way, right? There was one of them, right? There wasn't many databases. Or how? Do you see what I'm asking?
Well, I mean, there are things that I think the composition service might need from other services. There are still discussions going on in the task force whether or not when we do composition, there will be operations that will take a while, and how do we track those? Are we doing it with jobs or tasks? The task service is already there, and how is that integrated with this standalone service? How will you create a new task?
Exactly, right. And
that's all detail, isn't it? I don't understand what you want to do from the outside, which is trying to figure out what happens within.
Yeah, so we need to kind of decouple maybe the discussion from, there's the API definition, which is the redfish work, right? And then there's sort of the realization of ODIM. Right. So my question, I guess, is what is the system of record that keeps track of all the things that all the different services may need to refer to or would require or would affect in a particular way? Like, what is that system of record? Do we need one? Do we have multiples? And then we have a federated layer on top of it that allows you to query across all these different databases. How would that work?
Well, and there are questions around the spec, but there are also questions around the implementation here, because the proposed implementation is a Python implementation. So it makes it can obviously be whatever language, right? But if we expect that longer running operations are tracked with things like tasks, the question becomes, how do we, if I do a composition, will I get a task URI back then? And in that case, is that integrated so I can hit the API service and ask about that task later on? How will the communication go in AMI's mind with the task service? Because the task is not something that you manually created. It's a response by the system when something is taking too long.
Right. So when it gives you a task service, it gives you a task monitor that you can go manage the task. So this is the same question that they're dealing with from our update, is because tasks are non-persistent. So if a task says, this is going to take a while, guys, I'm going to refer you to, I created a job because your job has persistent semantics. I'm going to point you to a job and say, further monitor and go to the job, because the system may reboot, all kinds of things can happen. And I, as a task, may go away at any time because I have no persistence.
But we don't have a job service in the stack today, John. And by the way,
wait. In what spec?
In the stack, there is no.
Which
spec? This is a project that is.
In your spec. Right.
It's not mine. In this communities stack.
Okay, all right.
We don't.
You should have, because else you're at the
Well,
mercy of a task.
So that's one example, right? How do we synchronize state of different things across all the services where there are objects that are going to be manipulated by two different services?
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But I just want to respond to John first.
Yeah.
We had extensive discussions with DMTF representatives whether or not to track these things with jobs or tasks. And back then, the input I got was a job is something somebody creates. The task is a reaction for the system that something is taking too long.
And you're absolutely correct in the advice that was given to you at that time. But given the discussion within the firmware update task force, we've kind of changed that too.
Yeah.
And I can show.
Yeah,
right. I can show you the white paper we're doing on how to go from tasks to jobs.
Yeah,
because it was necessary.
But going back to the inventory system of record, right? You know, how do we want to deal with it? If we want to have standalone services that are completely independent of each other, then by definition we would have to have localized databases. And when everything is running together as an ODIM instance with a bunch of services embedded in it, it means that potentially we have to manage different databases using different technologies.
Yeah, and another thing is
you don't need to have them different. You only need to ensure that you keep the data separate. It could be in a database service.
Right. So I want to tease apart the physical persistence, which is what the database would provide, from the access of the data, which may need to be federated or may not be federated. I don't know, but somehow we need to make sure that if I want to group a composed system, then the model is followed. But you know, if the information about that system is only inside the composing service, then how do I get to it?
Yeah, so we need to have these type of interfaces so that a new service can use things like the task service. And that's why I'm asking these questions, because I want to understand what the requirement is on the current solution, right? The other thing I see is that if anything in the process of composing something would generate an event, then the composition service will also need to have a leg into creating those events, right?
Right. Consuming events from somebody else, right? Yeah. Because something could be seriously broken, and maybe there is some notification that may require the action of the composition service.
So these are just some challenges that we can throw out, and we have to discuss further. I think that doesn't invalidate the composition service by any means.
It does not. No. I'm not saying that it does. I'm simply trying to think through what it means to have standalone services as part of ODIM.
Yes. Yeah. Good questions and good inputs, Alex. Yeah. So the way that we have also envisioned, right now, AMI has envisioned, in the long run, there is a possibility, there is a feasibility that there could be multiple resource aggregators also, right? No.
Yes.
But on the northbound, on the orchestration side, if each of these services are individually or atomically deployable, of course, with solving the questions that you already raised, right, in terms of system of record, we need to work on who will be the system of record. Based on the current discussions, it appears that it will be beneficial if we stick with, resource aggregator, because that's the one which is
or create a common database, right? or create a common inventory layer that you can include in standalone services or in can be included, or not, depending on what you're doing, right? So to me, the persistence interface is what we need to define. How it's implemented locally or remotely or whatever, that's behind the scenes. But at least we need to define a way of persisting the model objects somewhere, right?
Yes, yeah. And isolating, so that is a good input as well. Maybe we can chart it for another discussion session where we can talk about this, whether that should be an isolated thing or will it be beneficial, the pros and cons, right? But on the higher level, the orchestration layer on the top, right, the component which is going to consume the composition service or the resource aggregator, right? That should be able to consume multiple of these things as well. So we should think about that as well. So The way that we are creating is there should be another orchestration level on the northbound, which will consume the composition service and resource aggregator
But they will be,
depending on the use cases.
They will be external. For example, when we had discussions about compositions with VMware, they basically asserted that vSphere would be the composer.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so that's not going to be part of what we do. They would compose against Redfish defined APIs. That's what they were asking for at the time. And the issue was that, you know, some implementations were not compliant with that. So, so that's kind of what we need to account for, right? That it's not necessarily the aggregator who is always on top. But from the administrative perspective, you know, I may want to add a composed node to a grouping called cluster or VMware cluster, right? And then once I have that cluster, I may want to perform aggregated operations on it. That's the use case we need to maybe kind of double click on in terms of, you know, top to bottom, in terms of persistence, in terms of the interfaces and everything in between. How would that work?
Yeah, but now you lost me totally. Because
Thomas.
Yeah, you lost me totally now, because what I hear you say is that the resource aggregator is both underneath the composability, it's over the composability, and it's on the side of the composability. And I think that we got to have a structure where we understand what does a resource aggregator do, in terms of more than an object-oriented language, just a method, so that we have a structure.
But the aggregation service implements a set of interfaces.
Yeah, but you need to differ between what a resource aggregator does and what the aggregation service does. So I think the resource aggregator is just a loose term for what HPE contributed initially.
Exactly.
It's a set of Redfish services. And as we worked on this, we quickly realized that there needs to be some aggregation function here. And with the help of collaboration with Intel and others, and John Leong specifically, we managed to get an aggregation service into the Redfish spec. And I think that aggregation service is one service among all the Redfish services.
That's right. That's what I'm trying to...
But are you envisaging that the resource service could be used for aggregating a number of, let's call it BMCs, that sits on the southbound, because you want to be able to do reset of 5 of them at the same time? Then it goes into the composition
No,
service as a block of things, potentially.
No, why would it go into why would it go into a composition service? I mean, just think about it, Thomas. I could be grouping together composed and non-composed systems.
So why the hell do you want to have a resource aggregator on top of the composition, where the composition is doing a subset of selecting a number of servers interconnected with networks? Why do you want to do a resource aggregation on top of those?
I don't think you should. I think the aggregation service itself doesn't have a clue of what is composed or not.
My point is that the aggregation service knows how to create groups of hosts that will be under management and then issue commands against that group. And
so a host now is a northbound concept of a composed server.
It's a system. You use the model, Thomas. It's a system. Okay, some systems will be composed, some will not be. That's the Redfish model. Okay, so the notion of a system can be, you can compose it, bring it into existence, and then the question becomes, if I wanted to take a bunch of composed systems, and this is, by the way, a real use case from at least 2 Intel customers. Okay, I want to be able to create VMware clusters on the fly. And then I want to be able to configure all the members of the cluster in a consistent way. That's what they want to be able to do. And so the way they would do it is that their orchestration layers, whatever they are, would compose a set of nodes, and then they would group them together, and then they would perform an operation on that group. Whichever way you want to map it into ODIM services is fine by me, but I'm just saying that's the use case. These systems didn't exist before the composer, the composition service created them. Now they need to be manifested somewhere, and in the model, there's a place for that. And now the aggregation service, if I go to my GUI or whatever, on top of all this, and say, I want to group together every host in the VMware cluster A and another for VMware cluster B and so on, I need to be able to do that.
Alex, so my point on this one, all the physical computer systems would be exposed by the resource aggregator. All the, let's say, composed ones would be exposed only by the composer, right? And the resource,
And now I have to go to two places to figure out what's what. Makes no sense.
But you cannot merge those two, because they're exposed by different entities, and you cannot just merge it. So
well,
I guess
and there would be different authorities as well in accessing those, because if you are the janitor trying to find out what the physical
but Thomas, if I'm an operator, and I want to do a power on reset on a group which is heterogeneous, composed of systems that are composed and non-composed, which is how I want to run my management domain. How would I do that? How would I implement a top-level orchestration function that does that? It goes to one place, queries one set of systems, goes to another, does that. Now, why?
Well, you're limited by the spec here, obviously, and right now, I think the way you would do it is you would keep your own lists or collections of servers that you want to do operations on.
You really think that's going to work at scale?
Well, that's fine, but it's more of a DMTF discussion, and perhaps our use case.
Wait, why is it a DMTF discussion? Right, we define the interface, right? You guys are talking about implementation issues.
Right. From the DMTF.
This is not a DMTF issue.
Because you cannot hit the aggregation service today and get a view of what's composed or not, and that's what Alex wants to do.
What I'm saying is that there is the information model defined by Redfish, by the Redfish APIs, right? And then it has to be implemented, right? Reduced to one or more data models that are pruned or whatever, but they collectively represent that information model and the relationships that that information model defines. So either we do this through federation so that from the consumption perspective, no one has to worry about a composition service or an aggregation service, right? Or they just go to one place, to one API that says group these hosts together. That's what you want to do. You want to make it easy, not hard.
We're going to run out of time, guys. So I think we're going to have to pick this up next week, but I also will send out a few questions to AMI about the approach here. And I think we can solve this, but I just want to see what changes needs to be made so that we can work with standalone services and still make it possible for you to generate an event and these type of things, right?
Yes,
thank you, Jonas. Yeah, we are almost there. Yeah. Thank you, Jonas. Yeah, we only have like 2 more minutes. I wanted to say that, but yes, good.
I think maybe we should define some use cases for next time for the discussion and see if we can satisfy them, because ultimately we want to make this consumable, right? So if a customer or an integrator or somebody wants to develop a orchestration layer on top, there are certain things they probably want to do in a very efficient way.
So Alex, can you drive that? I think some of those
I can define, absolutely, I can define some of the use cases that I am aware of.
Yeah, okay? I think some of those will drive changes into ODIM, but I think some of them will also eventually affect the spec. If we at least try, we can try to influence. Right?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of requirements from system integrators. We also had a bunch of requirements from Verizon. Those were publicly made inside ONAP, but they wanted to be able to compose resources on the fly.
Yeah, that would be really great to get like use cases so that we can think of that one. Rafael, as you said, you also shared your questions to us so that we can think of the other integrating the task surveys and other things. We have some plans, have a utility function to talk to the event log and other stuff. But the task service, we haven't think about it. That's a very good input for us. So we can shoot us the questions. We will brainstorm it and we will come back to you guys in the later weeks.
And like John is pointing out, it might actually be a job, in which case we need to introduce a job service, and we will just need to. It's good to get the discussion started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With
Great.
that, guys, we're out of time. So.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Yep.
Talk to you later.
Wonderful
Thank you,
discussion.
guys.
Yeah. Have a good week. Bye.
Thank
everybody.
you all. Bye.
Bye.